Today, I want to talk about framing, specifically in the context of arguments about transgenderism. Particularly, I want to talk about an argument put forward a lot by Ben Shapiro and his supporters, and why it's super wrong. So, transgenderism. What's Ben Shapiro's argument about this? Well, basically, he thinks that we should classify gender dysphoria as a mental disorder. He thinks the same thing about homosexuality, but that's a story for another time. His argument for this is pretty simple. Men are men, and women are women. So if you're born a woman, and you think that you're a man, or vice versa, then you must simply be deluded. It's like thinking that you're a moose. You think that you're a moose, and you aren't, therefore you're deluded. The major advantage of this argument is that it's very simple. It boils down to, well, women are women, and men are men, and that's just that. You can make this argument very quickly, and arguing against it takes a long time. So, what's the issue with Shapiro's logic? Well, nothing actually. Shapiro's logic is perfect. The problem is that he's using his perfect logic to disprove something that no one is actually saying. Nobody's really trying to say that women are men and men are women and these categories just don't mean anything. That's an incoherent statement, and that's exactly why Shapiro tries so hard to convince everyone that that's what his opponents are saying. Leftists are trying to make a conceptual distinction between gender and sex. Sex is what's determined by chromosomes. It determines which genitals you're born with, how much facial hair you'll have, stuff like that. Gender, on the other hand, is the cultural performance that comes with sex. Gender determines what types of clothes you'll wear, what types of hairstyles you'll have, stuff like that. Transgendered people are claiming that their gender doesn't match their sex, not that their sex is something other than what their chromosomes say. So Shapiro starts the argument right off the bat by completely ignoring what his opponents are saying and simply telling the audience what he thinks they think. This is possible because Shapiro doesn't do real debates very often. Instead, he mostly gives speeches and then has a Q&A afterwards. It's very easy to misrepresent what your opponents are saying when they only have 30 seconds to say it, and you have as long as you want to debunk it. With all of the advantages that Shapiro has given himself, he barely even has to make an argument at all. In a Q&A, Shapiro can simply set the frame of the debate however he wants. So he simply sets the frame in a way that will make his opponent's arguments logically impossible. If you start with the assumption that sex and gender are the same thing, as Shapiro does, then you're forced to conclude that transgenderism is a mental disorder. But that's the problem. The whole debate is about whether or not sex and gender are the same thing. So Shapiro just assumes his own conclusion and then pretends that he's the God King of logic. Maybe it will help you understand if we look at another issue where this same framing bullshit gets pulled. It wasn't that long ago that people didn't recognize the distinction between sex and sexuality. I've actually heard people argue that gay men are deluded because they think that they're women. The argument goes something like this. Women are sexually attracted to men. Gay men are sexually attracted to men. Therefore, gay men think that they're women. Since gay men, in fact, aren't women, that must mean that they're deluded. Again, the problem here isn't the logic. It's in the frame. The logic is perfect. Your assumptions are just wrong. There is a difference between sex and sexuality, so saying that gay men are deluded because they think they're women is simply a way of restating your false assumptions and then pretending that you've gotten somewhere. This is obviously pretty frustrating for whoever you're arguing with. Unless they have a very solid understanding of rhetoric and propaganda, they won't even understand what's happening. All of a sudden, they're backed into a corner where they have to argue with a statement like, men are men and women are women. Whenever you're trying to counter a simple claim with a complicated one, you're already at a disadvantage. And on top of that, since Ben Shapiro mostly does Q&As, you probably only have 30 seconds to make your case at most. That's not nearly enough time for you to say something like, well, I think we need to investigate our assumptions here. He'll just dismiss you as a snowflake or something. If it doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, then it doesn't fit in a Ben Shapiro debate. On top of this, Shapiro mostly argues with college students who don't have the funding to spend all day thinking about these things. So if you ever find yourself debating with him, it's probably your first time debating in public, and he has 10 years of experience on you. You can rest assured that someone is there, filming, so that when you make a mess of yourself trying to argue a question that's based on the assumption that you're wrong, of course it'll end up on YouTube. Anyway, that, in a nutshell, is why I think Ben Shapiro is full of shit. Go ahead and leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and thanks for listening.